This is In Between Them, a podcast where we uncover what it really felt like to be a child of divorce. I am Shannon Darrow, and each episode brings honest stories from brave adults who lived through this as children. This is In Between Them. Let's get going. Well, hi, Ilian. Thank you so much for being here today. I know your time is valuable, so I appreciate every moment that you're spending with me.
Hi, Shannon. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you.
Great. Well, I want to start by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself, how long you've been practicing, where you're at, just to give anyone listening a little bit of frame of reference around your experience and where you are.
Yeah, thank you. I was licensed on December 2nd, 2013. I was 24 years old, one of the youngest attorneys in the state of California. And from basically the last 13 years or so, I've been practicing as in the area of family law, and I have been doing crossover work in probate and trust and estate litigation that complements the family law work that I've been doing. I'm a certified family law specialist and have been since March of 2021. And my journey in family law started back in high school when I walked into a law firm because I wanted to figure out what does it mean to be a lawyer. And I got lucky to walk into a law firm that was actually minors counsel on one of the most famous family law cases that most litigants will find out about, which is the Montenegro case, which when you get a final order on custody and visitation, now you got to show a substantial change of circumstances before the court will revisit the issue of custody and visitation. So I got lucky, just random by chance walking in. I clerked for them, and then I started my legal career with them as well after I graduated from law school, and it's been a great experience so far.
Can you explain the difference between being a family law lawyer and a family law specialist?
Yeah. Receiving your specialization by the legal board of specialization in California requires you to basically take another bar exam specifically in the family law area of law. So I had to sit for a family law exam, basically a bar exam just on family law. It's a whole day event. And that's one component of it. The second component of it is the experience component. So in order to become a certified family law specialist, you have to prove that you've actually taken matters to trial, and not just one or two, not just half-day matters, but multi-day trials. You have to prove that you've settled so many number of cases, that you've done the educational requirement in family law specific areas, such as the psychological impact on children from a divorce. You also have to get the community to basically support your admission as a certified family law specialist. So if you've only done a couple of cases, that's not going to get you there. You need judges and other lawyers to evaluate you and say that you know exactly what you say you know. So it's not just passing an exam, it's also getting the legal community to vouch that you know what you're doing as well. In the state of California, less than 1% of lawyers are certified specialists. And so when it comes to being a specialist, it's the cream of the crop in terms of attorneys that know what they're doing to get a case resolved.
That's pretty fantastic to have achieved that and to want to do that, to want to do more, because you can keep doing what you're doing without it in a way. And I think that family law is that dynamic and complicated, that that level of expertise and it being validated, like you said, from your community and your peers is really important. So congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. And I think it's important for anyone that is seeking an attorney that's going through a divorce to seek out a certified family law specialist, because I can't tell you, Shannon, how many times you walk into a room or you get on the phone and you're talking to opposing counsel, and it is a community. And so there, the fact that you've done cases with this individual in the past or this opposing counsel in the past, or you've appeared numerous times in front of a judge, there's a certain level of credibility that you bring to the table. And then having worked with people on so many different cases and opposing counsels, they know how you operate. Like, he's not going to try to hide anything from us. He's going to be a straight shooter. And so it really helps drive up settlements. And as much as I have focused my career on litigation and being there for people that need somebody to try their case and bring it to a conclusion when settlement's not an option, I have settled, way more cases than I've ever tried. And a lot of that comes down to there's a level of respect that specialization holds within the community with other specialists, because they know, oh, this person had to go through this experience and how rigorous it can be to become a certified specialist.
Yeah, and I would think that that familiarity you have with opposing counsels and judges gives you a bit of a comfort level in those situations when you do have to go to trial or you do have to have highly contentious discussions, that probably produces also the likelihood of a better result because you're comfortable in it versus being uncomfortable and not being able to think as clearly or just, think on your feet as much. So all of that makes sense as to why it matters significantly. So thank you for sharing that clarity.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, you walk into a courtroom, and especially in Orange County, we've had a lot of turnover in judges. Um, I don't think that they give anything I say any more or less weight that they give someone that's just a regularly practicing family law practitioner. Um, but I tend to be on uh, very updated on the law. And for instance, back in September of 2024, we had a major rehaul to the way child support calculations were calculated. And I went into a fairly new judge's courtroom, and I was telling the judge, listen, basically every single child support case now has a reason, an automatic reason to be recalculated because there was a change in the law. And the judge looked at me like I was a crazy person, but I was right. It triggered an automatic change of circumstances.
Wow.
Because the calculation changed. And so while most people may not have even thought of that as an issue going into, what I would call the legislative process, that, hey, this is going to change and require everybody to revisit child support numbers because they're all going up. And for some people, it could be a significant difference. For others, it might only be $20, $30 or $50. But for some people, it could be hundreds of dollars that get added on every month as a child support obligation. But having, being on the forefront of, I'm constantly looking at brand new appellate cases coming down, constantly evaluating where's the law changing, and trying to forecast where it's going is helpful for my clients in terms of understanding the evolution, because it's not stagnant. It's constantly evolving. This is one of the areas that is constantly evolving.
That hits perfectly for my first question. But before I get into it, what I did want to set up as we continue our conversation is to point out that the reason I am talking to people and the reason that I am doing this podcast is really to, at the end of the day, give hopefully parents the ability to do divorce better, in the sense that I feel that there is a gap in their, I don't know if it's information, education, the perspective, but I just feel that there's wonderful lawyers who advise you, and there's therapists who give you, studies and tell you about trauma and all of that. But there's something about the perspective of the child that is unfortunately not able to garner under 18. We can't just put all these young kids, on every method of distribution in terms of audio visual and have them tell about their current experiences. So getting people to come as adults and share their experiences is shining a light on the differences of perspectives between what parents think is going on and what kids are actually experiencing. And it doesn't always mean that one's right or wrong. It's surprising how different those perspectives can be. And the more parents can be aware of what their kid might be getting from something that they're doing or saying or whatever, maybe parents could make different decisions. And so my first thing that I wanted to ask you about, and it really comes directly from my podcast. I have spoken to people with a very wide range of age, in terms of people in their 50s whose parents got divorced when they were children, to people in their 20s and 30s. And obviously through that, and I'm sure you weren't around for it, but you know about it, the evolution of parenting time and parenting schedules. And so these people who are really in their 40s and 50s experienced very low structure, very flexible, very free parenting time schedules. And obviously, I know that there's societal impacts on that and on the changes moving forward. But then you kind of come to where we are now, and probably, I don't know, maybe the last 10, 20 years, where we have more structure, very rigid parenting time schedules. And again, people have changed. Social media, I think, has an impact in it. And we don't have to get into everything that impacts these things. But I do feel that my observation in talking to people was that there seems to be less anxiety ridden children, even though they're now adults, and adults, as they've grown up, when there was slightly less structure. And then when you have you infuse more structure and more rigidity, it seems to be slightly more impacting on children's anxiety. And my thinking is that's not actually happening to the kids directly. It's more what's going on around the environment and the feeling of flexibility versus rigidity in the homes, and then what's happening because of that. And I wanted to see, number one, if you can explain briefly a little bit of that evolution. And then also, do you see that, or is that your impression as well? Or do you think that it's more based on the families than it is on the parenting time schedule?
Here's kind of like my short and my long of it, right? It really depends on the age of the child. And what I mean by that is, little kids, when you're talking toddlers, then you're talking little children, and then you're talking middle-aged children, then teenagers, the preteens, and then teenagers. They experience the world in a completely different manner at every single stage. So depending on where the child was developmentally, will significantly impact their perception of the divorce, and it will significantly impact their feelings and the anxiety and the stress that comes from it. I think that the biggest stressor for these children is how divorce is talked about. And I think that for a lot of parents, they try to, well, they go through a different a cycle where it's grief, anger, disbelief, and then you get parents that are in the acceptance stage and things are a little bit more calm in their mind. And so they're not trying to villainize the other side. They're not focusing on their selfish desires. When you talk about flexibility, what pops up in my mind is I don't think it's two things. Historically, dads have not participated in the child rearing activities for about 80, 90 years. And what I mean by that is you have to take a look back, before we provided this structure for dissolutions. Because it dates back to the founding of our state of California, and the laws upon which California bases its laws date back to Mexico and then to Spain, and the community property system that is embedded in California law dates all the way back, hundreds of years to Spanish law. And I mean, the law derived from Spain. But if you look historically how most of society operated, we were, for the most part, farmers. Well, farmers spend a lot of time with their children because you need all the hands you can get on deck to milk the cows and pick up the eggs. And so families spent a lot of time with each other. Dads spent a lot of time with each other. Then you had the Industrial Revolution, where dads and moms, and it's not one party, but dads and moms spend a lot of time outside of the household. And particularly when it came to the Industrial Revolution, it was really dads on their own outside the household. Mom took care of the kids. And then you had World War II, and things shifted again, where now it's a two household or two families. It started in that evolution where both of the parents needed to work in order to support a household. And then there was a significant period from the Industrial Revolution until recently where dads were okay with that. And then that shifted. And I know I'm focusing on dad, and I'm looking at the evolution of it from the perspective of the courts, which, right, back in the 50s and in the 60s, it was almost automatic. It was like, what are you talking about? Dad's not going to participate. Dads weren't even allowed in the delivery room when mom was having a child. It was very mother-centric. Mom would almost automatically get custody of the children. All the parenting time went to mom, and then it was really at the discretion of mom and the children if they saw dad. Dads were treated kind of like, well, you're the bank. And I think that notion really started breaking apart in the 80s and in the 90s when dads wanted more participation. And I was reading something recently that said, this generation, meaning like the millennial generation of dads, are the most involved in their children's lives than before. So you got to stay with me here, there's a huge gap in family law attorneys. Especially when I started practicing, there wasn't a lot of young attorneys. It was like all the attorneys I was going up against or that were in the practice were either 5 years or younger, or they had 35 years of experience under their belt. And same with the judges. And so those same judges and the same lawyers that were, well, mom automatically gets custody, were the ones that were still, running the roost. And they were still the ones that were dictating how things operate. And it really took a lot of psychologists coming into the family law arena to change that up, right? It's not just one party, it's now both parties. Here's my opinion on it. I am a very strong believer in stability and continuity for any child. So I disagree with the with some of the newer judges, especially over the last 10 years or so, that have come out and just said, I start off at 50-50 timeshare. Well, that is an arbitrary number that has no analysis on any individual family. That takes nothing into account as to what the child was doing. It doesn't take into account that, child would go to school every day because mom took him to school every day, and dad just did not participate either voluntarily or involuntarily. Meaning, hey, dad's got to go to work, or and same with the flip. I've seen a lot of couples in the last 10 years where mom is the primary breadwinner and dad's at the primary caretaker, and it's the same analysis there, where you have to look at stability and continuity of care. When I started practicing, the questions that you'd pose on an initial RFO to your client would be, who wakes up the child every morning, who gets them dressed, who makes sure that they brush their teeth, who gets them to school on time, who talks to the teachers, who makes sure that they get home from school, who does their homework with them, who makes sure that they have lunch packed for school, who gets dinner ready, who does the put downs, so from the child's perspective, they're now exposed to a major shift in their everyday process, in their everyday lives. And what did they do to deserve that? Nothing. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is there was nothing that they did. And so to have to be involved in the dissolution process. And so I see in children, or I hear from my clients, the children that have the most anxiety are the ones that are exposed to the adult talk, the ones that can't just go home with mom and just be like, all right, everything's cool. Nobody's going to talk about the divorce. Nobody's going to say dad's a villain and he's a cheater. And same with on dad's side. I'm not going to go spend time with dad. He's going to ask me, is mom seeing someone new? And who's she sleeping with? And what, it's like 21 questions every time you get in and out of a car. No child wants that. I mean, I know it from my own experience with my son. It's like trying to get him to tell me anything after he gets in the car from school is, pulling teeth. And I'm asking him questions like, well, how was your day? And did anyone make you laugh today? Did you have, anything funny happen at school? It's like he needs time to just reset, and he's not in an environment where his parents are divorcing or anything along those lines. It's just knowing it from my own experience.
Yeah. I would have to. So first, when you said that it's like a presumptive 50-50, but you're saying that's not the place to start. You have to do this analysis, or at least in a perfect world, you'd be doing a more significant analysis based on all those factors that you said. And I was thinking that maybe when I preface this with less structure versus more structure, it's actually one might be more representative of the way the child was living previously, to now we're abruptly forcing this kid into this very rigid, abnormal structure. And there's probably something in between. And there's also probably something where maybe you see the adjustment, where the adjustment is not as abrupt for children, that maybe they gradually get to this let's call it 50-50, which isn't representative of the way they were living, but it was a gradual shift. And so they actually have time to adjust to this new normal versus like a, hey, dad moved out, now you're going here then, and you're going to be here then. And, so I think that's where I, again, get to the impacts that these children feel because of what the parents are going through. And the other thing that I heard you say is, clearly what is talked about. I would say that to me might be my biggest takeaway from everyone I've talked to. And it shouldn't be a shocker because you're told that when you get divorced over and over. Be cordial, it's written into your judgment. Everybody knows it. Don't talk bad about the other person. And it still happens. And I think some people try really hard not to do it and it still happens. Some people don't even care and they don't think about it and it's all they do to the kid. But when I have been hearing from these people give me these stories and these memories and really telling me, and I can see how deep that impact is from the parent talking about the other parent, or someone who not only did her parent talk about, but her parent's friend talked about parents, or grandparents. And then I have these vastly different dynamics where no one ever said a word, and the people hated each other, but the kids never knew it. The people were just able to somehow bury that and do it on their own, and in front of these children be united. And those are incredible stories.
I would say that most people hire me because they want to get the job done. I'm, I'm not at the top of the pay scale, um, but there's a lot more attorneys out there that are much cheaper than I am. And I tell people I get the job done. That's my focus. What's your goal? Let's focus in on getting that goal. And I say that because most of the cases that I end up handling are the high conflict cases. And there's a lot of cases that I have that I think if people just took a true co parenting class and did some true conjoint therapy where they were open and they approach it from a level of curiosity rather than from animosity due to past instances, and realize, okay, this is bigger than me. This is for my children. I think that from my perspective, it's like every single case has a level of animosity. You're getting divorced. If you don't have a level of animosity, then there's something wrong, right? Like if you're just so apathetic to it, it's just like that would throw a red flag in my mind of, well, what's going on here? But if you are able to recognize, like, okay, this fight isn't about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting my children, providing them with stability, understanding that they may want to spend time with the other parent and they may want to go over to the other parent. And as a lawyer, it's really hard to guide your client and say, hey, you need to have a rigid structure that you can enforce. But it's due to lack of trust from the other side. If the other side was reasonable and understanding, and both parties weren't worried so much about what the child support consequences would be, I think it's got to be very difficult when say your 13-year-old, and I'm just using this as an example, but say your 13-year-old daughter, she's got the weekend with you and she just started her period. And she's like freaking out. She doesn't know what to do. And the court order says, reasonable telephone communications with the other side for 13 minutes or 15 minutes or something based on their age. And you have like even a 2-2-3 schedule. So you have a 50% schedule. But I couldn't imagine telling my daughter, and I don't have a daughter, but I'm playing that part in this scenario, no, you can't go see your mom this weekend
Mm-hmm.
because it's my time.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that if I were to ask mom, hey, can we just swap weekends? She's got a big, physiological change, and I think that she needs her mom there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm willing to keep her, or do you want to come over and have, some time with her and chat with her about this event? Like, I couldn't imagine just the level of, dread that your daughter would be feeling during this experience, and all because it's your time.
Mm-hmm.
Or you got to think about all the big events that are happening. Hey, your son's got prom, and it's mom's weekend, so mom's taking all the photos, and mom's you got all that involvement on that activity, and then dad gets pushed off to the side, or mom gets pushed off to the side, or maybe dad's got prom weekend and he doesn't care whatsoever, so he doesn't take the photos. And those are all very much core memories for that child. And when you, as a lawyer, you're saying we need rigidity in terms of, hey, how do we enforce this order? But the parents then need to have that flexibility. And so, with some of the most successful cases I've seen, are both parents are willing to co-parent, and they're willing to swap days here and there. They don't, as long as they're spending time and both of the parents are equally contributing to the child rearing, neither one of them have any issue. Um, I can think of numerous cases where the parent says no to the child. I mean, those cases far outweigh the cases where the parents are like, yeah, you want to go see dad? He's down the street. You want to go hang out with him for a couple hours and come back here and spend the night here? Fine, go do it. Or same thing with mom. Hey, you two want have a nail appointment that you want to get to? Go to it. It doesn't affect us, because at the end of the day, when the child feels like, and I'm talking about older children, younger children need a level of stability. They need to know, like, their agenda. They need to know, all right, I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be there. Especially between like 6 and I would say 11, 12, you have to feed the child an agenda. I'm here, I'm with mom today, I'm with dad tomorrow, I'm with mom today, I'm with dad tomorrow. But as children grow older, they don't need that same level of rigidity. There's got to be some flexibility, because otherwise the child's voice is completely lost in the mix.
Right. When you gave that example of the daughter, and I think about, in that instance, if dad had said, understandably, if you need to be with mom this weekend, totally fine. What that actually shows that daughter, that dad is willing to do for her, to understand what she's going through, to give up for her. Let's just say it's in a situation where he's not even saying we need to swap. He's just literally saying, I understand if you need to be with your mom this weekend. I totally get it, and go. And I think those moments pay off so much later because of that daughter feeling seen, feeling heard, all the things that kids need, versus, the opposite, where it's like, nope, it's my time. You can sit here, maybe you can call your mom for 5 minutes or whatever and ask her a question if you need it, but this is my time. I'm not giving it up. And now the involvement that child feels in this whole thing between the parents. And, everybody talks so much about using the kids as pawns and all of that, but that's a great example of, that's what that child becomes in that moment. It's no longer about her. And I think there's
Yep.
so many examples of that. I have so many examples of kids that have become very, very aware of child support issues, that have taken on that adult issue. I talked to someone who actually thought, my dad can't pay my mom, something's happening there. This is all because of me. Maybe if I kill myself, I can absolve my dad of that problem. He won't have to pay child support anymore. And luckily that didn't have a tragic ending, but that's how far kids take these adult things when they're made aware of them. And I just think that parents, kids know so much these days just
Hmm.
because of the world. And I think that in all these little ways they can get robbed of their childhood because they become aware of things between their parents that if their parents were together, or if they at least understood the impacts, they would not put this in their child's world, and children could just go on. And so I think too, it kind of goes back to having that kind of flexibility. But something that you talked about was like co-parenting classes or therapy. And I kind of have a two-part question. Is there something that you have been able to do, something that has worked for you, something that you've experienced where you are able to get people to shift their perspective? You kind of talked about initially getting divorced in that moment. It's this very heated, very emotional time frame. But in that time frame, people calm down. They forget
Usually
things.
2 years.
Okay, so I knew there was probably an average.
It's
So
about
let's
2 years before you calm down. Yeah.
So if you think about that, in my stint in law school, I remember the cooling off period in contracts and
Mhm.
things like that. And is there something to that? Because I do think that you get a lot of people that are back for modifications, probably shortly after that cooling off period. Is there a term, or is there like um, a discussion within family law about that period of time? How do you get through to parents faster? I know that, like, I think I have 9 questions in there for you all at once, but I guess my biggest question was, have you found a way to get through to people sooner to decrease those impacts, or is it really just difficult?
It, you're going to get a lawyer answer out of me. It really depends on the person. And it really just depends on whether or not there is some other underlying psychological issue that this person is dealing with that has not been identified or not. So, what I mean by that is you may have a person that I would call is like a serial offender, right? They are constantly in court because they need to modify or shift this or that. They can't, they're so rigid to the order that they can't see, the forest for the trees. And a lot of the problems are really parenting issues. They're not legal issues. They're not physical custody issues. They're parenting issues. And the problem is you can be a C minus parent and still have equal timeshare with your children, and the parent on the other side is an A plus parent. And that doesn't mean that just because you have two different parenting styles that may clash, that one parent is providing less to the child than the other. Um, I think knowledge is the biggest key. So I tell clients you need to see a therapist, personal therapist. You got to go to therapy. Um, yeah, I think that a lot of people are afraid of going to therapy due to, well, can this be discovered? Can
Mhm.
what I said to my therapist now get, become part of this court record? And they get scared because, well, I think that they're all quacks, and what are they going to do? I don't need my head shrunk. There's a lot of benefit to just getting that perspective that you are responsible for yourself. Doesn't matter what another person does. You are 100% in control of your own life. And if you're upset or you're angry or you have all these unresolved feelings that are going to affect your ability to think properly, to make an informed decision, to see what your actions are doing, it's you that needs the help, not the other side. And yes, I have done so many cases with narcissists on the other side that have been diagnosed as narcissists, that are people with bipolar disorders, um, people that are on lithium. They just cannot function. And even through all of that, I've been able to guide my clients on the actions they need to take that conform to an order, but keep them sane, because you're dealing with someone that is not 100% there,
Mm-hmm.
and by their own fault or not. Usually, if it's drugs or something along those lines, it's their fault, so they're not usually involved in the rearing. But it could be just someone that is just got a difficult personality to deal with. They want to do everything by the book. They don't want to, exceed the order or by a minute. And so those are the most difficult parents to deal with. But they're also the people that you entered into a relationship with. You would know. It's like, if this person is by the book and to the penny, they're probably an uncompromising person.
Mm-hmm.
you know if they're a little bit laissez-faire, like, it's not a big deal, um, we're solution oriented, you're going to be able to find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times what I find is that you have a client that's just so fired up. They brought the kids back at 6:30. It was supposed to be at 6 o'clock. They violated the order. I want to go after them for contempt. Okay, well, let's do a reality check. You ready to spend $35,000 on this? No? Okay, well, then you should probably let it go. Um, and don't be vindictive on the next time around. Why did they do it? Were they running late because they were in traffic and it was a one time occurrence? Or are they habitually doing it? Are they habitually unable to get the kids in the car and arrive on time? Do we need to adjust the schedule? Is that going to make you feel better? Is a third, like, because 30 minutes a day, twice a year, what is it? 24 hours adds up to a day. It's not going to change your child support order. It's not going to change any other obligation. So what's the real purpose here? Are you trying to exert control over somebody else, or are you trying to control your own life?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to people that are trying to exert control over somebody else, those are the ones that are always going to be in a fight. They're always ready for the fight. And it's the principle of the battle. And that's the hardest part about custody cases is you cannot monetize what decisions you're going to make. And a lot of times what I find are the best ways to bring somebody back to reality is, one, go see a therapist. I'm not your therapist. I'm going to tell you what legal options you have and what we're going to do. Two, I generally guide every single client that walks in the door. There are parenting books that you need to read. That's information that you can utilize to make decisions. As a parent myself, I read parenting books. Just because I don't know what it's like to be in the mind of a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old. I don't know what that's like. That's not something that I can, I have a vivid memory of my childhood, but I don't remember the day to day and the stresses that a 8-year-old may have. That's not there. And so it's trying to understand your child and at the same time understand what their needs are and then try to satisfy those needs. That tends to, from my perspective, the parenting books, the therapy really helps bring down, in my experience, what I've seen is bring down the fire and really get people thinking from a different track. Taking the assessments. What type of parenting styles am I using? And am I using the right parenting style for this child? Because we've been talking a lot about the parents, but children are they test their boundaries constantly. That's what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what can I get away with dad? Okay, let's try it with mom. Mom says no. Okay, well, why does mom say no? And if there isn't like a good excuse or a good reason behind it, they turn around, they say, well, mom doesn't love me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, look, you can't drink soda at 9 o'clock at night. You can't have a bunch of chocolate because it's not good for your body.
Yeah.
Not because I said so. And you need to treat your body as a temple. And, what, yeah, dad's got his rules over there. Maybe it's because dad's only spending 2 nights with you a week and he
Yeah.
wants to make it a more special time. But you know what? I'll talk to dad about this sugar intake and see if we can get on the same page.
Yeah.
Is that good with you? And then they have like consistent, stable rules because you got to think if there's different rules in different households, the child is going to be confused. Wait, can I do this here or no? Maybe over here. Oh, I forgot I can't do that here.
Yeah.
So, it goes back to co-parenting effectively, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that requires having a discussion, communicating. It
Yeah.
requires more than just like a text message or, our family wizard chat or talking parents chat. You can't communicate that in such a little period of time, even on something as small as like, can they have candy or can't they?
Yeah.
When? How much? Did you consult with their primary care physician? Have they had blood testing? Are they, in a position where they can have candy? Or is there something else going down under the surface that we don't know about?
Yeah.
Those are all things that require conversation and input.
But also, wouldn't you say those are things that to even get to that point, it requires a certain level of willingness and awareness. And, I think so. When I got divorced, I had to do the parenting class thing and I went and sat in the parenting class. And I remember thinking, and I'll read every book about my kid. Like all I want to know is how does my kid tick? I mean, I still read every book about parenting, but I went to that parenting class and was like, this is not for me. This is for like people who had a baby when they're 20 and they don't know what to do. It just, to me, I couldn't relate to that class. And so probably I tuned it out. I checked the box, I was there. But to your point, it should go more to what you're saying, which is let us tell you what your kids are going through, or let us tell you about the impacts of this on your children. Because ultimately, me telling, or, half the people in there are being told, this is how you should parent well, they're tuning it out. But if you have to force them to go, there's got to be more effective content. And I think if you make it about their children versus their parenting, they might actually be less offended or less willing to listen. That and that kind of comes back to my podcast, which is I'm hoping that these kids telling these stories, even though they're telling them as adults, are more impactful, and you kind of told that story of sugar. And I think it has a couple different things to it, which is you might have a kid that has ADHD, and
Mhm.
giving him sugar is not at the wrong time, is not what needs to be done. But you're also in a world where you hope both parents recognize that the kid has ADHD, they can talk about that, and they can parent accordingly. But then I had these guests on, two sisters, and they talked about how they got chocolate milk and cake or something at their dad's, and it was just always something that they had, and they looked so forward to it, but
Mhm.
it made their mom irate. And all they could think was, this just makes us happy. We only do this when we're at our dad's once in a while. Like, you don't need to have a big fight with dad because we had cake and chocolate milk on a random Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was. Just let us be happy. And so there's a bit of a delineation between impactful needs to fight, or I'm saying it fighting because that's what people see it as, but you would hope just have conversations, let's get on the same page, because we need to do the best for our kid. If
Yeah.
we were still married and still living in the same house, we probably would by default even just be a more united front. So why does our kid not benefit from that now because we're divorced? I spoke with someone who was like, mom could not handle him ever talking about his dad. And except if it was something negative that the kid had to say, then the mom was like overjoyed, tell me more. And he said, if I went and stayed the summer with my dad and he took me to Disneyland and I did this and I did that, I just wanted to share that joy with my mom. I just wanted to be able to tell her, I went to Disneyland and I rode on this roller coaster and it was so fun. And instead, this mom made it so that he couldn't ever share that with her. So he has to intentionally suppress things at, like, I don't know, I think he was like 12. And I think there's a ton of that. And that's not to say that parents can't have these feelings, but it's really understanding what that is doing to the child. That kid, that man went on to tell me how that was just the beginning of suppressing feelings. And he's now 50, whatever. And, he still sees that impact in his life. Kids cannot escape the fact that their parents got divorced. And
Yep.
parents get one chance to not make it worse. I love that you're trying to say go to therapy. How often are you able to write that into judgments that people have to go to therapy, or is that more of a suggestion you make?
I suggest it usually early on. Um, and it's not in every single case. Um, and I don't want to offend, right? I don't necessarily like writing it into judgments. And the reason why I don't like writing it in is because, look, therapy only works if you are willing for it to work. If you are going into it with an open mind. Like you talked about the co parenting classes, a lot of those classes don't teach you anything. They don't teach you stuff that you don't already know.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into someone with a PsyD, a PhD level of degree, and I don't even think that you need a ton of therapy, right? But you need something that will help you express your feelings in a safe environment and focus on resolution rather than um, constantly living in a cycle within your own head of a reality that just is not there,
Mm-hmm.
right? The fact that your child has a better relationship with the other spouse does not mean that they're going to have a worse relationship with you. It's not a competition. They can have a different relationship with each of the spouses. Like, I go and I get my nails done with mom, and we go shopping, and we love to go have brunch. And with dad, I get to go fishing, and we do outdoorsy things. Or mom loves to take me to soccer, dad loves to take me to basketball. Those are the sports they played growing up. It it's not a competition of who loves the child more, or what does the child or where does the child's affections lie. I mean, we're all human. The children are human. They're going to generally like one parent more than the other just because that's how humans operate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to like someone maybe a little bit more than the other, or you're going to get along with someone a little bit more than the other. It's also cyclical and it's in waves. Sometimes, with me and my son, there are times where we are just clicking on all cylinders. And there are days where it seems like we're living on different planets. And that's just life.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that they're going to go through this divorce and then everything's going to be green on the other side. Well, if it wasn't green to begin with, it's definitely not going to be green after a divorce.
Right.
And so it's not a fix. And then you have children, and you're trying to maybe pit them against one or the other parent. So and I to me, I think it's better to go down the route of a divorce than to live with hate and to live with resentment and to live with um, yeah, these horrible feelings towards the other spouse. And the children feel that too. I'm always interested in the cases where people don't divorce and what happens there too, because those feelings linger for years and years, and there's no outlet for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we we need more of the psychology behind what's actually happening. And because it can't be something that you can just, okay, let's, this is the same for everybody. It's just not. Every single child is different. Every single parenting style is different. I hear it all the time with, even with my own son, this friend can do this at their house. Okay, well, that's their house. That's their rules. We do things a little bit different. Well, why? Justification. Oh, okay, I understand that. Cool. We good now? Yes, I understand what the structure is. But they need an itinerary, they need an agenda, because that provides them levels of comfort and stability. I know I'm going to be with mom today. I know I'm going to be with dad tomorrow. I know there's going to be something coming up. And as they get older too, we look at, it's not just children isolated. It's children, in my opinion, or families are like trees. They build roots, and those roots are your community. And so it's, well, I have a baseball team that I'm a part of, or I have a soccer team that I'm a part of, or I'm part of cheer, or I'm part of dance. And I see a lot of parents that maybe didn't even want to have their kids in that in the first place, or weren't involved in it. The first thing they try to do is rip them out of all those activities.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I always say, well, why are you trying to destabilize an activity that provides them stability? They know every Wednesday they got baseball practice to go to. And now you just rip that out because Wednesday's my night and I don't have to take them to extracurricular activities that I don't consent to. Well, hold on a second. Who's that benefit? Does that benefit the child, or does that benefit you? I've done cases where their parents don't live anywhere near each other, and they're still having exchanges. And I remember a judge saying something to the effect of, travel time is not wasted time. Just because you're traveling with your child doesn't mean that you don't get to spend quality time with them. In fact, that's probably the best time to spend with them, because they're trapped in a car with you. Right. So they got to talk to you. Yep. And it's also the time that can be the most damaging, because they have to sit in a car with you. And so, it's the quality of the engagement with your child that I'm always concerned about, but the courts might not be.
Right.
And especially with there's this new statute, there's this new law. It's a bill, so it hasn't passed yet. It's in its excuse me. It's in its infancy. It was just introduced, I believe, like February 18th of this year. So it's not even a month in the legislature. And it's called the California Equal Shared Parenting Act. And I feel that a lot of people are going to jump on this because it shifts the presumptions around, it shifts the analysis and treating California families as unique and the children as unique to treatment of conformity. All judges are now mandated to start off at 50-50 timeshare. Well, we've talked about this earlier today. Even a 50-50 timeshare isn't necessarily in the child's best interest. It can be very rigid. It's not flexible. the purpose of having these orders is to provide frequent and continuing contact between the parents and the child. And depending on the child's age, depends on how much time can go by where it doesn't cause a detriment to the child. At 8 years old, a week can be very detrimental to that child. It could cause them to start thinking, does mom not love me? Does dad not love me? Why aren't they here? What's going on? Even if the other parent isn't significantly involved in the day-to-day activities of that child. But I think talking to each other with a level of respect, remembering why you got married in the first place, and focusing on the good qualities that the other person has, and you don't got to minimize the bad qualities. You don't have to forget or push those off to the side. But I'm sure that there are good qualities in every single parent that the child genuinely likes. And I'm sure there's bad qualities in every single parent that the child genuinely dislikes. And it could be simple things, right? Dad plays music in the car too loud. Don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be something as ridiculous as that.
That is to your point, though. A kid will complain, and that can literally turn into a significant fight between the parents.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to have that, back to your communication. If mom could say, hey, Johnny keeps coming home and he keeps saying that you play the music in the car really loud. And dad's like, you know what? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But if he said that, I'll just turn it down a little, or I'll talk to him about it and say, is this okay? This volume, it should be a conversation, not an attack. And I think something that you said that I want to go back to when you were kind of talking about the new statute that's coming down. I kind of thought that's where they already were. So that's interesting that it's now trying to become like a starting point. But is there, and you mentioned child support, and I do think there's a component to time and child support. And I don't know exactly what California formula is. Where I am, it's very much based on overnights. What are your thoughts around that? Because the parenting time should reflect all of these factors that we talked about. Whatever that ends up, if that ends up looking like 50-50, great. But if it doesn't look like that and it reflects what the family dynamic should be, then that's what it should be too. But ultimately, where you have this financial piece that is tied to time, I realize there has to be some mechanism for determining child support. So there has to be some way to do that. But why is it that, has there ever been a different way? And would you agree there's a massive conflict in equating financial obligations to time?
So I'm not licensed in any other states yet, but I say that because obviously everything I'm saying here is you shouldn't take it as legal advice. I know that there's when we started off, I should probably put a disclaimer that if you have a legal issue, you should consult with a legal professional lawyer. That none of what I'm saying should be taken as legal advice.
Right.
But I know that there's other states that have other formulas for determining child support. I believe Texas has a formula that doesn't necessarily take into account the timeshare as a basis for support. So it's just number of children, and this is the number that you pay as a baseline. And instead of looking at it from a timeshare perspective, you look at it from a standard of living perspective. And so I think in California, it would probably be better if we had established, like, all right, you have one child, one child means, you know, unless you have to deviate from the formula due to the available income, but it could be, $1,000. Okay, that's your minimum support obligations, $1,000, and then you add on to it, or whatever that number is, add on to it based on the standard of living of the parents. So obviously, you're not going to have, a multimillionaire or billionaire paying $1,000. You'll adjust for, well, what's the standard of living at dad's house and compensate for that, so that the child doesn't feel a change between households. There's the Britney Spears case, right, with Kevin Federline, and I remember seeing headlines about, he gets to just kind of hang out, and he knocked up Britney, and now they're separated, and he's got this piggy bank or this cash cow that he's milking all the way through, and I believe that the children live here in Anaheim Hills, and Britney Spears was living in, I believe, Malibu or Calabasas at the time. And I think, like, well, even if she's paying him $25,000 a month, those children aren't living anywhere near the same standard of living that Britney Spears is living under. I'm sure they don't have all the support staff that Britney has up at her house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know the individual facts of that case, but I look at, like, a lot of these cases where you have these child support figures, and then you look at, like, the lifestyle of dad versus the lifestyle of mom. It's like they'll never match up. It just is never going to happen with the formula that we have. So the statute, or the proposed language of the act now puts it where there's a presumption, meaning that you start off at, if you have certain facts, this is what the court's supposed to do. That equal parenting time is in the best interest of the child if all the following apply. Both of the parents are found to be fit, willing, and able to parent, and both of the parents reside within 25 miles of the child's primary school or educational institution. Well, there's 25 miles in Southern California.
Yeah.
Is, you're talking about maybe an hour drive in certain circumstances to get the child to school. An hour in the morning for a child to get to school. I know when there's nothing else that you can do, or if it's a one-time event a week, it's not too bad. But in every single case I've had where there's an extended period of time for the child to get to school in the mornings, it is always the worst day that child has. They are not attentive. They are not, they're tired. They show up, generally in shambles, like they forgot to brush their hair because they're rushing out the door. They didn't brush their teeth. And those are very important activities for a child to do.
Yeah.
Especially as they get to their preteens, their appearance, their hygiene. They get made fun of at school because they forgot to brush their teeth. It's embarrassing for them. It creates resentment. And so, to me, I look at the law, and I think we had it right when we were looking at what was the status quo. Let's keep that for a period of time, and then we slowly integrate what one parent wants, or to a position, even if you get to 50-50, but slowly integrate that so that the child has a period of time to adjust, whether it's 3, 6, months, a year, and take into account where that child is developmentally and what their needs are developmentally, rather than just say 50-50. And, we're removing a lot of the judge's ability to have discretion in these cases. And to me, I don't know who's driving the bus on this issue, but there's a lot of people that they should be weekend parents. And I hate to say it, but they should be. They don't have the bandwidth take care of all the things that they need to take care of without it significantly affecting their ability to be good parents.
That kind of goes back to what we were saying, is that awareness of yourself. Your awareness, it's like anything else in life. You're not good at everything. And it's okay. It doesn't mean you're bad at something. You're just, maybe you're not the best, or maybe you're the best parent in a certain circumstance, but not in a full week of taking care of everything for the child. You know what I mean? And people should be okay saying, this is how I can be good. This is a capacity that I have. And so
Mm-hmm.
I should parent in this way, because this will afford the best opportunity for me to have the best relationship I can with the child. And I was thinking about when you just said, like forcing it and taking into consideration where the kid is in terms of age. And it made me think about something that, as your kid gets older, you start to realize, wow, I only have them for 18 years. And as you yourself get older, you realize how the 18 years with your parents was actually this little blip in your life. I say little blip. I obviously know it was hugely developmental, but in time wise, and as I have talked to lots of people, what I have discovered is your relationship with your parents after 18 is very different than your relationship with your parents prior to 18. And to your point of people fighting to get 50-50 or whatever it is, let's say the goal is 50-50, but let's say it takes us 2 or 3 years to get there. So the kid doesn't unravel to get there. And so by the time they get to that 50-50, their life kind of got to this new normal in a way that was very palatable for them. What I see in that is the preservation of relationships with parents
Yeah.
versus kid doesn't want to do this. I don't care. It's what the judgment says. That's what we're doing. Now you've broken something that has to be repaired in the hopes that people have the ability to repair it. It also goes back to something you said, which is kids doing this in his life, parents get divorced, and then one parent says, Wednesday's my day and I'm not taking him to karate anymore, or whatever it is. And what I've also been picking up on is when parents get divorced, if everything else in kids' lives stay normal, kids are better.
Yeah.
And it extends even to, which I know becomes hard, but it extends to family, friends, or extended family. That if extended family is kept in the life of the child, they also fare better. And so it's really about, we can break up and we can have this divide, but if we can keep everything else in place as best as we can, that child can kind of navigate this one change in a way that is a little bit more logical than we're changing up your whole entire life. Every facet, you're changing schools, you're changing churches, we're all moving out of the family home that you've known for 10 years. Everyone's going to be in a different place. We're going to different grocery stores. I mean, it's that minute in a lot of ways. And now the kid is completely upside down.
And it
And
might be small for you, right?
yes, totally.
Because it's like, you could be in your 30s and you moved 17 times in your life. So it's like, oh, no big deal. I'm moving another time. Not a big deal. But
Right,
for a child that's 7, 8, 9, 10, it's like, this is all I know.
right.
And then for a child that's 11, 12, 13, 14, it's like, well, wait a second. I just got through eighth grade. Me and all my friends are going to this high school. Now you want me to go to a different high school. I have no comfort level. I
Oh,
have no safety net. I know no one. And you
right.
want me to restart? Like, why do I have to do all these things
Yes.
because you're getting divorced?
Yeah.
I
Not to
think the
mention
most,
their hormones are probably raging and
yep,
everything else, is going
you
on.
said 18 years. I don't think it's 18 years. I think that you have a child for about 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you get. You
Yeah.
know, like, I mean, it's hard because I don't want to discount the what I call the best years right? 0 to 5,
Mhm.
which are the most important years for a child's development. Um, uh, but your child takes on, you start seeing their personality like explode around 5.
Mhm.
They now start school, or they may have started school beforehand, and now they have friends and they're doing play dates and they're engaging in sports, and they're really becoming a part of the community themselves. And then that time ends.
Yeah.
12, 13, you're no longer super mom, super dad. They're looking at you like, man, this person is stupid. Why do I listen to anything they say? I want to go hang out with my friends. And everything becomes, and that's what you want them to do.
Right.
You don't want them to stay at home. You don't want them to be attached to you. That produces an unhealthy relationship down the road. You want them to go out with their friends. You just want to do it in a safe manner. You want them to be involved with this whatever sports team that they're interested in. You want them to take those risks while they still have 5 years under your roof, or now no, I guess kids aren't leaving until they're 26, but you want them to take those risks where the consequences aren't so severe for them,
Right. Yeah.
and be safe in that environment where you can catch them. But if they're like, no, I'm going to be, with one parent for half the time, and they live across town, and yeah, I'm still going to the same school, but I can't do band and I can't, participate in this play. Like, you've stifled their
Yes. Growth.
creativity, you've
Yes.
stifled their growth, you've stifled their ability to take risks, their ability um, to learn from failure. And I think that how parents handle their divorce really impacts a child's relationship down the road, right?
100%.
If it's done with grace, and it's done from a place of, look, I don't hate you, I just don't want to be married with you. I still love you. I'm just not in love with you. And I want our kids to succeed. I don't want them to fail. I want to make sure that we do everything that we can together to get to that next level, get to that next stage in our lives. The most successful divorces that I hear about are the ones where the schools have no idea that the parents are even divorced.
Wow.
There's no involvement. The kids just keep going on as though nothing's happened. I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of people trying out, where they don't sell the marital home, but they're not paying child support. They're paying the mortgage in lieu of child support, and they get a secondary apartment,
Yes, I've
and
heard that. Yeah.
they alternate like who gets to spend time when and where, and mom or dad is on a business trip during this period, the other period of time.
Yeah.
Um,
You kind of said it when you said that about band. When parents live and so kid can't be in band or he can't be a part of the community. So he is still in the school, but he can't do anything to be involved. What that also is doing to him is making him feel different,
it's
and like
isolating them.
and that is the last thing that any kid, but especially high school kids, the last thing that they need to feel is isolation, because that's just going to
Mhm.
cause a whole nother thing. And it goes back to that community and all of that, but it's also, you get divorced, you get to go on and have a different life. Kids, they feel these impacts, but they will only feel different if that is the world that is created for them. To
Yep.
your point of, these amazing people that I think it's called their nesting or something, where they're keeping that
Mhm.
marital home and popping in and out. And I see lots of difficulties in it, but I also see so much benefit for the children, in terms of like little things like they have all their clothes they want. They have all their shoes. Their school
Oh
books are
man,
all in this, and those are all the things that just cause so many problems
problems.
that, there is no clear answer. But I think that what you have been able to identify is that if we can recognize the different dynamics and somehow build something around that, recognizing that yes, there are situations where people need the hammer. You know,
Mhm.
there are just those situations, but that should be the last option. And we shouldn't be forcing all the people that can exist in a bit of a more creative environment that represents the dynamic of their family. And then somehow, if you can get everybody to go to therapy, just to recognize, even if they do it for their kid and not themselves, if you can see the bigger picture, that you get one chance to raise these kids and you just want them to want to be with you when they are 25, that they're not running away from your house the second that they graduate from high school because they no longer want to be under a roof with you. That's what you should be aiming for, and everything should be trained to build that, versus I need to be at war with this other parent because I need to win this fight, because God forbid they like their mom or dad more than the other person, and what is that actually in me, my problem, if that's what I'm fighting about, and so I want to ask you your biggest takeaway that you see, the biggest misconception that parents may have going into this, that they realize later and they're like, wow, I didn't have to go to battle like that. Like, what is the biggest epiphany that you feel like maybe parents have?
Like my biggest piece of advice to parents divorcing that have children is you cannot make decisions from a fear-based position. If you are mom and you're like, I got to protect these kids from dad, and if dad is generally a good dad, fairly involved, it'll probably end up, look, there's going to be feasibility, right? Look at the work schedule. It's just a numbers game. Look at when they're available to actually spend time with dad and figure out a schedule that works there. And then same thing with dad. Um, and I say this from a position of, I guess, any parent. Um, when it comes down to it, right? You can't have a fear-based model for making decisions, and I feel like every single person that walks into my office is afraid. They're afraid that the other side is going to take away their kids, and so they react from that position. But in, I would say, 7 out of 10 cases, that's not the reality. They're not trying to take away your kid. You work, 12-hour days, 5 days a week. When do you have time to spend taking care of the child rearing activities?
Mhm.
And so obviously there's going to be a need for a change somewhere in the system. Um, and what I mean by that is, look, if your reality that you keep feeding yourself is that I'm never going to see my kids again, or that the other side's going to take away my kids, then that is where you're going to react from. And that is where you are going to be hypersensitive and hyper focused on.
Mhm.
And especially if you're a child of a divorce. I've represented people where their parents got divorced and it was tremendously messy. And then they go and they make the same mistakes that their parents made, where they're isolating the child. They're not engaging in flexibility that's in the best interest of the child. They view, like, hey, do you want to go to a soccer game with me, as a threat? And if anybody looking at it from the outside is going to say, well, yeah, don't you want to go see, Jimmy play soccer? Like, why don't you go? But they view it as like, well, they're trying to get one over me, or they're trying to have me be responsible for the soccer game, or whatever it may be. But they're not basing their decisions from a reality based, um, from reality. They're basing their decisions from the story that they're telling themselves in their own heads. And it takes a come to Jesus moment with your client and your lawyer. If your lawyer tells you, we're going to do whatever you want, from my perspective, get out and run, because that's not what the judges are doing. The judges, in my opinion, are looking at it and trying to um, base the custodial structure, the timeshare structure, on reality. Can you pick them up from school or can't you? We don't want them sitting around at school all day. Well, can they go to daycare or after school care for an hour or two while you get off of work, and then you can come pick them up from there and they can spend the night with you? Do you not have space? Are you living in a one bedroom apartment and you have three kids? You, there, you got to find a different living situation. Do you have a dog and two of your kids are allergic to the animal? Well, you can't have them if that's the situation. I mean, it's basing your decisions off of what's in their best interest and what you
Right.
can do, and coming to terms with that. Like, you know what? I'm putting my career over my kids. Fine. There's no shame in doing that as long as you acknowledge it. But if you try to do both and you're lying to yourself and you're not being honest, then you're not gonna be successful. It's gonna end up like every other case. I tell people, settle your custody cases. You are going to spend much more time dealing with that order than the judge ever will. It's your life. If you can get into mediation or get in with an art, even doing private judging on that issue, where you can spend a little bit more time developing what it is that the issues are, and unless there is a true problem there, substance abuse, um, some sort of psychological disorder, uh, emotional abuse, neglect, just unfitness in general, then you're going to need to be a little bit more flexible. And the other side's going to need to be a little bit more flexible in order for the co parenting relationship to work out, in order for your kids to be successful individuals.
Yeah.
Because the rate at which divorced children get divorced, I forget what the statistic is, but it is almost a near certainty. You can put money on it.
Yeah.
And it is, in my opinion, the greatest destroyer of wealth in America. Is you get divorced, you're resetting, everything goes to zero. The only people that win out of the system are the system and the
Mhm.
lawyers. Everyone else loses.
I just have one last question. We talked about books. Do you have a book that is like your go-to recommendation to parents who want to do divorce better, who want to do things right for their kids, or who just want to understand the impacts more?
I'm trying to think. I know I had a list of books, and I can follow up and give you that list because it's a little bit different for um, it's a little bit different depending on the age of the child, and so I have like different books based off of age groups.
Okay.
Like, you don't have the same parenting techniques that you want to utilize for your teenagers that you do with your
Right.
toddlers, right?
Right.
But you're still trying to get the same effect in terms of. I'm blanking on the name of the co-parenting book that I like to recommend. Um, because it's in my list. You get
Well,
lazy
maybe
on something and you forget
yeah,
about it. I
maybe
apologize.
it'll come to you. In the meantime, what I'd love you to do is tell people where they can find you if they're in California and they need an attorney.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon, for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time, and this is such important dialogue. I think that if people had more information about the effects of what divorce does on their children, they'd take a different approach to it, and overall, it would reduce everybody's stress levels. My name is Ilian Alchehayed. I am the COO, Chief Operating Officer, and shareholder at Tustin Law Group in Tustin, California. Our focus, we primarily focus on high-end dissolution cases and trust and estate litigation.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough. Like I said, I know that your time is incredibly valuable and you've spent quite a bit of time with me today, and I am super grateful for it. So I just thank you so much. And I appreciate your wealth of knowledge and your experience. And I think very highly of you. And so I would hope that people who are in need would be in great hands if they reach out to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. Together we can shape healthier paths for families to do divorce better. See you next time on In Between Them.